Poets, not otherwise than philosophers, painters, sculptors, and musicians, are in one sense the creators, and in another the creations of their age. From this subjection, the loftiest do not escape. Shelley, in writing this preface to his epic poem, Prometheus Unbound, meant poets like Virgil, Dante, Shakespeare. In fact, he was describing his close friend, Lord Byron, and he was defining the romantic hero. In romantic poetry, the poet is no longer a man with a talent for writing verse. The hero he writes about and the writer are the same person. To create is no longer to represent, to describe, but to press out something from within. The common inheritance of the romantic poet is bequeathed to his heroes in print. The lover's solitude, the secret which gnaws at the heart, the voluntary exile. The heroic proportions which fill the page reflect the heroic proportions of the creators. And as the poets grow older and wiser, so do their heroes. Chateaubriand was born in France in 1768. 20 years later, Lord Byron was born in England. Both men enjoyed huge literary and social influence, and both their work and lives had enormous impact on the younger generation of writers, painters, thinkers. And in an extraordinary tapestry of chance and genius, each man influenced the other. In later life, both men repudiated their own early heroes and the public that made them famous, and looked forward to a new world that they sensed to be just out of reach, beyond their own horizon. Chateaubriand, the great French novelist and essayist, was in his youth one of the figures central to the launch of the Romantic movement. As a grand old man of letters, near the close of an adventurous life, he was himself worshipped by a younger generation eager for change. One evening in the spring of 1813, some of Chateaubriand's young admirers stationed themselves in the grounds of the great man's house, in the hope of catching a glimpse of him. In his memoirs, a key document of the Romantic age, Chateaubriand had explained his decision to buy this house and grounds.
It is 4 years now since, on my return from the Holy Land, I bought a gardener's house hidden among the wooded hills, close to Sceaux and Chantenay. The trees I have planted are thriving. I have chosen them from the various lands in which I have wandered. They remind me of my travels and nourish other illusions of my heart.
Chateaubriand had set about writing his memoirs during his retirement. His aim had been, he said, to give an account of myself to myself.
I have never been happy. Nobody knows the happiness I was seeking. Nobody has really known the essence of my heart.
Chateaubriand was born an aristocrat, with boundless possibilities for idle leisure conferred on him by birth. But both his life and his works were active, vital, and radical.
I was born a gentleman, and I believe I have profited from this accident of the cradle, keeping that steadfast love of liberty which is the special characteristic of an aristocracy whose last hour has struck. The aristocracy has 3 successive ages: the age of superiority, the age of privilege, and the age of vanity. Once it has left the first behind, it degenerates in the second and expires in the last. I have met nearly all the men who in my time have played a great or small part in my own or other countries. I have explored the old world and the new.
Nevertheless, he suffered from that essentially romantic malaise, the sense of being alone, isolated, even in the thick of society.
From my youth, my spirit did not walk with the souls of men. The thirst for ambition was not mine. The goal of their lives was not mine. My joys, my sorrows, my passions, and my talents all made of me a stranger.
A stranger in the world. Chateaubriand's sense of being somehow apart from, while living in the midst of contemporary society, is nurtured by Byron. For him, it develops from the sense of being a stranger into the sense of being rejected by society, cast out from the fold. The feeling turns into physical fact. Byron scandalizes polite society and is sent into exile. In the dramatic verses of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, Byron created a hero who was the embodiment of the outsider, and who was rapturously received by a public who seemed to see in the wild and storm-tossed Harold the hero they had been waiting for.
There is a pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. There is society where none intrudes by the deep sea, and music in its roar. I love not man the less, but nature more from these our interviews, in which I steal from all I may be or have been before, to mingle with the universe, and feel what I can ne'er express, yet cannot all conceal.
When Byron wrote Childe Harold, after a voyage to the Mediterranean, he opened up the souls of an entire generation. Childe Harold somehow embodied the mood, reflected the sufferings of thousands of men and women who themselves felt the malaise and the aimlessness and the disappointment of the wandering Harold. At last, art joined hands with life. At last, a young modern Englishman, similar to the people who read him, reflected in his fiction the true drama of 1812 Europe, a continent shaken by revolutions and wars. Childe Harold was a poem about the sea. It had been through the travels of his youth that Byron had first attempted to escape, to flee from mediocrity. The success of Childe Harold made Byron the unrivaled hero of London society. 2 years later, on the first day of publication of The Corsair, 13,000 copies were sold, an unprecedented number for a poem. Byron's influence was unique. His appeal was universal. He was read by everyone. Men and women who would never normally read poetry eagerly read the poems of Lord Byron. At this period in his life, Byron was anything but an exile from society, however romantic.
And now, Mr. Rogers, we shall meet Lord Byron.
But my dear Lady Caroline.
Yes, I think you shall introduce...
Refused to meet me?
You were somewhat preoccupied, I thought.
I've been more preoccupied since I met you.
A rose and a carnation in February?
I've been told that your ladyship likes everything that is beautiful and rare for the moment.
That is true, for the moment. Tell me, Lord Byron, they say that you're very wicked. That you kept a harem when you were in the East and had a slave girl sewn up into a sack and thrown into the Bosphorus. Is that true?
Not exactly. Sex was so difficult to come by.
They say that you fought many duels and that you always kill your man. Do you deny it?
I would never deny anything to you.
They say that you're mad. Bad. And dangerous to know. Is that true, too?
At the House of Lords, Byron champions liberal causes. His radical views are not appreciated by the establishment. Neither is his popularity helped by his admiration for Napoleon, which he had never hidden. To uphold such ideas in a country at war with France, and in which his talent and his loves had already made for him a world of enemies, was to court disaster. Little did the consequences matter to me. My political opinions are for me what a young mistress is to an old man. The crazier they are, the more I like them. At the age of 25, Byron begins to write a journal. In this journal, he sets about examining his life, concluding that it had been a life of disillusionment and failure.
At 5 and 20, when the better part of life is over, one should be something, and what am I? Nothing but 5 and 20. I by no means rank poetry or poets high in the scale of intellect. It is the lava of the imagination whose eruption prevents an earthquake. I prefer talents of action, of war or the Senate, even science, to all the speculations of mere dreamers.
While in England, Byron rejects the popular success of his early work and incurs the public's wrath by his championship of Napoleon. Chateaubriand in France risks exile when he openly declares his disgust for Napoleon and his policies.
Absurd in administration, criminal in politics. What did this foreigner have to seduce the French? His military glory? He was stripped of it. Under Bonaparte, under the Empire, we, France, we disappeared. There was no longer any mention of us, and everything belonged to Bonaparte. I have ordered, I have conquered, I have spoken. My eagles, my crown, my blood, my family, my subjects.
In 1814, the pamphlet entitled Bonaparte and the Bourbons appears in Parisian bookshops. Chateaubriand openly opposes the growing tyranny of the man he had served for 4 years. And Napoleon, outraged, upholds the exile of 20 kilometers from Paris imposed on the pamphlet's author. He is unwilling to deal out a more severe punishment because, as he admits, Chateaubriand has the sacred fire. It is not long, however, before Napoleon is toppled from power and himself sent into exile. Byron confines his disillusionment to his journal.
My poor little pagod, Napoleon, pushed off his pedestal. It is his own fault. Like Milo, he would rend the oak. And then all the talk of his readiness to give up what is already gone. What whining monk art thou, what holy cheat? Alas, this imperial diamond hath a flaw in it, and is now hardly fit to stick in a glazier's pencil. A pen of historians won't rate it a ducat.
But the exile of Napoleon is but a prophetic prelude to Byron's own exile. For Byron, the disaster is the failure of his marriage. Though a daughter was born to Lady Byron, the marriage soon became insupportable. Byron was apparently given to periodic rages, made impossible demands on his highly principled and conventional wife, and had not abandoned an incestuous affair with his half-sister, Augusta. Lord and Lady Byron separated. Amid much public scandal, Byron leaves England for good.
Marriage comes out of love the way vinegar comes out of wine. It is a bitter and disagreeable drink, which time has caused to lose its heavenly bouquet and is transformed into an insipid and common household brew. No one takes an interest in conjugal tenderness. There is nothing unworthy in the kisses of married couples. Do you really think that if Laura had been Petrarch's wife, he would have written her sonnets all his life?
From the distance of the Italian lakes, Byron writes to Lady Byron.
I have just parted from Augusta, almost the last being you have left me to part with. Wherever I may go, and I am going far, you and I can never meet in this world, nor in the next. If any accident occurs to me, be kind to Augusta, and if she then is also nothing, be kind to her children.
To his sister Augusta he wrote,
What a fool I was to marry, and you not very wise. My dear, we might have lived so single and so happy, as old maids and bachelors, had you been a nun and I a monk, that we might have talked through a grate instead of across the sea. No matter, my voice and my heart are ever thine.
Like a sleepwalker, Byron strays through Europe.
I am no longer living in myself, but I am becoming a fragment of all that surrounds me. The high mountains are like a feeling for me. They say that hope is happiness, but genuine love must prize the past, and memory wakes the thoughts that bless. They rose the first, they set the last, and all that memory loves the most was once our only hope to be, and all that hope adored and lost hath melted into memory. Alas, it is delusion all. The future cheats us from afar, nor can we be what we recall, nor dare we think on what we are.
On the banks of Lake Leman, Byron met with the poet Shelley. The two men made a pilgrimage to the places that had inspired the settings of Rousseau's novel, a key work in the development of romantic thought. His novel called Julie, La Nouvelle Eloise, sets new heights and depths for romantic love and pits passion against reason. Shelley, like Byron, a self-willed exile from the hypocrisy of English life, brought with him his wife, the writer Mary Shelley, and Claire Clairmont, a girl not quite 18 who had already made clear her infatuation with Lord Byron. Briefly content within this little circle of exiles, sharing with them boat trips on the lake, evenings together reading aloud, Byron was inspired to write The Prisoner of Chillon, verses prefaced by a sonnet declaring the author's belief in free speech, free thought.
Eternal spirit of the chainless mind, brightest in dungeons, liberty thou art. For there thy habitation is the heart which love of thee alone can bind. And when the suns to fetters are consigned, to fetters and the damp vault's dayless gloom, their country conquers with their martyrdom, and freedom's fame finds wings on every wind.
After an evening when Goethe's Faust was read aloud in translation, Byron begins to write Manfred, the story of another doomed and epic rebel. Goethe himself said that the work had the gloomy heat of an unbounded despair. Manfred, like his creator, is burdened with the crime of deliberate, knowing incest with his sister Astarte. In the poem, she kills herself in remorse. The most moving lines are a love poem from Manfred to Astarte, lines that mirror Byron's love for his own Augusta.
She was like me in lineaments, her eyes, her hair, her features, all to the very tone, even of her voice, they said were like to mine, but softened all, and tempered into beauty. She had the same lone thoughts and wanderings. Her faults were mine. Her virtues were her own. I loved her and destroyed her.
Byron dedicates the intimate journal he keeps during this period to his half-sister, Augusta.
I am a lover of nature and an admirer of beauty. I can bear fatigue and welcome privation, and have seen some of the noblest views in the world. But in all this, the recollections of bitterness, and more especially of recent and more home desolation, which must accompany me through life, have preyed upon me here. And neither the music of the shepherd, the crashing of the avalanche, nor the forest, the mountain, the glacier, the forest, nor the cloud have for one moment lightened the weight upon my heart, nor enabled me to lose my own wretched identity in the majesty and the power and the glory around, above, and beneath me.
The great German author of Faust, Johann Goethe, arrives in Venice nearly 40 years before Byron. As famous for his romantic hero Werther as Byron was to become for his romantic figurehead Childe Harold, Goethe travels in secret under an assumed name. He calls himself Jean-Philippe Molaire, adding after the name the vocation of artist to complete the disguise.
Thus it was written on my page in the Book of Destiny that in the year 1786, on the evening of the 28th of September, while passing in the lagoons, I would see Venice for the first time, and that soon I would be able to walk about and visit this marvelous aquatic city, this republic of beavers. Thank God, Venice is no longer a hollow name that was my torment for so long.
A city stripped of its power, its beauty threatened by time, Venice was for Goethe, as it was for the Romantics who followed him there, a state of soul, the melancholic theatre where each visitor gives his own performance. The spectacle of magnificent yet inexorable decay with which Venice presents its visitors touched directly on a key nerve in the Romantic sensibility. For the Romantics, Venice inspired a mood of luxurious despair, of exquisite pain, of delicious sadness. Chateaubriand wanted to devote to Venice one entire book of his memoirs.
The ruins of an old society, which produced such great things that it leaves one with a disgust for a new society, leaves one with no desire for the future. It makes you feel as though you are dying with all that is dying.
Venice inspired Byron to write some of his finest lines. He begins his fourth and last canto of Childe Harold in lines which are engraved on the poet's soul and on the city.
I stood in Venice, on the Bridge of Sighs, a palace and a prison on each hand. I saw from out the wave her structures rise as from the stroke of the enchanter's wand. 1,000 years their cloudy wings expand around me, and a dying glory smiles o'er the far times when many a subject land looked to the winged lion's marbled piles, where Venice sat in state, throned on her 100 isles. In Venice, Tasso's echoes are no more, and silent rows the songless gondolier. Her palaces are crumbling to the shore, and music meets not always to the ear. Those days are gone, but beauty still is here. States fall, arts fade, but nature does not die, nor yet forget how Venice once was dear, the pleasant place of all festivity, the revel of the earth, the mask of all Italy. But unto us she hath a spell beyond her name and story, and her long array of mighty shadows, whose dim forms despond above the dogeless city's vanished sway. Ours is a trophy which will not decay with the Rialto. Shylock and the Moor and Pierre cannot be swept or worn away, the keystones of the arch. Though all were o'er, for us repeopled were the solitary shore.
Upon his arrival in Venice, Byron writes to his friends,
I like Venice as much as I thought I would, and that was a lot. I intend to stay in Venice throughout the winter. The city has not disappointed me. I have lived too long among ruins not to like desolation.
Goethe had come to Venice with a false name to protect him from the curious. For Byron, no such disguise was possible.
With false ambition, what had I to do? Little with love, and least of all with fame. And yet they came unsought, and with me grew, and made me all which they can make, a name. Yet this was not the end I did pursue. Surely I once beheld a nobler aim. But all is over. I am one the more to baffled millions which have gone before.
Whatever he did, Byron was a prisoner of his legend. Even in Geneva, English tourists had pointed telescopes towards his balcony in the hope of glimpsing a lady's petticoat. Those who came to Venice hunted him down with prurient curiosity and tried to bribe his servants for a glimpse of his bedroom. From his hired palace on the Grand Canal, Byron's lifestyle sent shockwaves coursing through Venetian high society. When Byron's oldest and closest friend, John Hobhouse, joins Byron in Venice, he finds the poet has accepted the inevitable. Byron has settled into his legend and found solace of his favorite kind.
Mr. Hobhouse, his lordship didn't tell me that you were in Venice.
Well, I doubt if he remembers it himself. Where is he?
Upstairs, sir. Working. Allow me to show you the way.
Fletcher, what on earth are all these animals doing here?
Oh, his lordship just took a fancy to him, that's all. This way, sir, and mind the goose on the stairs. Very ferocious. Pagaglio! You know, if you ask me, they're the ones that ought to be in the cages. His lordship's in here, sir. Never been to bed all night. Bettilas. Mr. Hobhouse is here, my lord.
Oh?
Mr. Hobhouse.
Via! Via!
In his poem Don Juan, which Byron was now writing, he finally finds the means to express his philosophy of bitterness and despair and humor. His defense of the poem, "Confess, confess, you dog," would not take hold in modern poetry until more than a century later.
And that's enough. For love is vanity, selfish in its beginning as at its end, except where it is a mere insanity, a maddening spirit which would strive to blend itself with beauty's frail insanity, on which the passion self seems to depend. And hence some heathenish philosophers make love the mainspring of the universe. Those movements, those improvements in our bodies, which make all bodies anxious to get out of their own sand pits, to mix with a goddess, for such all women are at first, no doubt. How beautiful that moment, and how odd is that fever which precedes the languid rout of our sensations. What a curious way the whole thing is of clothing souls in clay. Where is the world, cries Young at 80, where the world in which a man was born? Alas, where is the world of 8 years past? 'Twas there. I look for it. 'Tis gone. A globe of glass, cracked, shivered, vanished, scarcely gazed on, ere a silent change dissolves the glittering mass. Statesmen, chiefs, orators, queens, patriots, kings, and dandies, all are gone on the wind's wings.
Shelley joins Byron in Venice. The two poets walk together, ride together, talk together. One evening, seated in a gondola, Byron and Shelley pass in front of a lunatic asylum, just as a bell is calling the inmates to prayer.
Doesn't it seem to you that this is the spectacle of our life? Conscience is the bell, calling us to virtue. Like these madmen, we obey without knowing why. Then the sun sets, the bell stops, and death comes.
In Venice, Byron keeps a record of his thoughts in his journal. One day, he catches the melody of a street organ.
It's a tune I have heard 10,000 times at London balls. Ah, so we'll go no more a-roving, so late into the night, though the heart be still as loving, and the moon be still as bright.
Italy becomes for the Romantics the place for a pause from lives crammed with action, with adventure, with controversy. And it becomes a place for taking leave from old loves, old lives. Chateaubriand, at 77, pays a last visit to his beloved Italy. To his devoted mistress, the once beautiful Madame Racamier, he writes,
I have taken again to these noble ruins, to this solitude, so profound, so peaceful, and yet so full of memories.
The writer and statesman has finished his memoirs, a task which took some 40 years. Called Memories from Beyond the Grave, they are, as he planned, the explanation of my inexplicable heart and the epic of my time. In his conclusion, he confides his visions of the future of the world.
New storms will arise. The future seems to promise calamities which will surpass the afflictions with which we have been burdened in the past. Already men are thinking of binding their old wounds in order to return to the field of battle. People and kings alike are weary. What comes after will be the effect of the general transformation. No doubt there will be painful moments. The world cannot change appearances without causing suffering. There will be no separate revolutions, just the great revolution approaching its end. The scene calls for other painters. It cannot concern me. It is your turn, gentlemen.
It's a vision that is remarkably in accord with that of Lord Byron.
The time of kings is over. Blood will shed like water, tears like rain. The people shall be victorious. I shall not live to see it, but I can foresee it.
As Byron was preparing for his final leave-taking from Italy, the island of San Nazaro was becoming a permanent memento of his stay there. Byron had become attached to the fathers of an Armenian convent on the island. He pays them regular visits and helps with the preparation of an English-Armenian dictionary. The Armenian language was difficult, but this very difficulty was part of the attraction.
I have found it necessary to coil my mind around some testing piece of scholarship. This one, the hardest I could find here, would be a severe trial for a serpent.
Byron did at times choose to present himself as a young old man who had lost all his illusions. But he had a sharp political faith and a desperate need for action. He conspired with the Carbonari family of Ravenna for the liberation of Italy. And when he left for Greece, it was because he considered that the liberation of a people was a cause worth the risk of his reputation, his money, and his life. Byron leaves Italy at the age of 36 to fight in Greece, to free the land of democratic legend from the tyranny of the Turks. Weary of his life, he went to seek a soldier's death and found it. His final verses betray profound self-disgust but unwearied intelligence and humor. His death at Missolonghi in April 1824 saves him from the curse of the Romantics, middle age. And in so doing, it makes of Byron an imperishable legend and confirms him as the romantic hero.
If thou regrettest thy youth, why live? The land of honourable death is here. Up to the field and give away thy breath. Seek out, less often sought and found, a soldier's grave. For thee the best. Then look around and choose thy ground and take thy rest.
Most remarkable of all is that these men achieved so much besides art. Travelers, exiles, statesmen. Like the heroes they created, they too were larger than life, confronting their own world and the unknown with energy, intelligence, a mastery that astonishes. They lived the passionate quest for the unattainable, and they themselves became heroes.
Venice, that city of memories, seemed anxious to rid itself of the physical reminders of Byron's sojourn there. Chateaubriand, visiting Venice again a mere quarter of a century after Byron's death, is astonished to find Byron's memory dissolving faster than the crumbling masonry itself.
What has become of Lord Byron? Today, nobody seems even to know his name. Venice, our destinies are alike. Our memories fade, while your palaces decay.
But the elegiac melancholy of these lines is redeemed by the defiant spark of the romantic spirit. It was born of a fierce self-knowledge that even when painful was so dear to Chateaubriand and to Byron.
You, Venice, you are perishing unknown to yourself. But though I perish too, I am aware of my ruin.